hardest thing about being an adult is, I mean, I'd say the hardest. I
was about to say, you can nail it down to one?
No, but like time management
yeah.
is just a monster.
Yeah.
It's the worst.
Time, man. You know, well, the amount of time you have, the amount of time you seem to need increases, and your energy decreases.
Yeah.
As you become an adult. It's like, wow, if I'd had the energy that I did when I was 25, this wouldn't be half as hard to get done.
Not only that, but it's like you have to balance like what you need to do versus what you want to do, and it always seems like what you want to do gets put up on a shelf.
If you're to some it does.
Yeah.
To people like you and I, it does.
Yeah. People who that's true. Considerate human beings.
We know plenty of people who prioritize what they want.
Yeah, that's true. So it's just one of those weird things. But it's constantly like I feel like I'm like fighting against a grinder.
That's because you are.
Yeah.
That's why the liquor industry is doing so well.
That's true, but I've cut down significantly on my drinking.
I see. There you go. Putting aside what you want.
Oh, God knows I want it. I've only had one glass of wine and one shot of whiskey in the past 2 weeks.
Yeah.
Yeah. Whereas I would have 2 or 3 glasses of wine every night.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like previously. But it's difficult. But you know what the best part? I got to set some of that stuff aside, and I got to do something that I wanted to do for this podcast. Not to mention the fact that we do this podcast because we want to. So this is a big thing that we put forward.
Yeah.
But I got to do one of my favorite things for this episode, and that is make a list.
I'm telling you, man.
And we are going to dive right into that. Hey, everybody, this is a very special episode of the Southern Fried Geekery Podcast. As usual, I am Caleb Alexander McKenzie.
Matt Trogdon.
And we would like to welcome you back for the next, I'm assuming, hour 15 minutes. I bet we can make it last that long. This is going to be what is annually one of my favorite things of the year. It's the end. It's the last episode in January. It's the end of the month. It's our chaos episode slot for what we usually do, which is a non-scripted thing. But because it's January, we got together and we decided that we would make this episode our quote-unquote favorite comics of 2021 episode. I love this because it gives us a chance to recap and rehash all the things that we really enjoyed. Unfortunately, Craig is still dealing with family matters and stuff like that, so he can't be with us. But he sends his love to all y'all. He is coming back. He wants us to express that. I know I keep promising you that, and people just kind of think I'm a liar. But we've got him under contract, so
true.
He signed, so we'll sue him if he doesn't.
Exactly.
But no, he has his list made out. Maybe we can talk him into dropping it on our Facebook page. But I want to reiterate, this is episode 214. For those of you who have hung out with us for 214 episodes, we really appreciate it. Thank you. It makes doing this all the more worth the while, even though it's worth the while if nobody listens, because we just like talking about funny books.
Yeah.
Because that's what we're about. So let's kind of get into this. But first, Matt, I just want to do a check-in. How are you doing, buddy?
I'm good. Probably better than I deserve.
I disagree with that. I think you deserve really good things, as always.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, this week was fun. We were just talking about, just very hectic.
Yeah.
Packed full of stuff that we have to do.
Yeah.
But as you so eloquently stated, this is the path we chose.
Yeah.
And we chose this indeed. So you and I got together and we decided 10 books, 10 slots, that we would do the best of, not the best of.
Favorite of.
We are not, we can choose what we think is the best, but I don't think we have the hubris to say that we are qualified to say, above all, what the best comics of 2021 were.
Well, not to mention, to make that statement, you imply that you've read everything, which is asinine.
And we haven't. So these are going to be what we consider to be the high water marks of the year based on what we have read, based on our own subjective enjoyment of it. And so if we have left out a book that you really loved, which I'm sure we're going to do, flat out, my reading taste if you listen to the show, Matt's reading taste if you listen to the show, those do not necessarily coalesce with the vast majority of people's listening tastes. And so it may not be your thing. That is not an insult. Please don't take it that way. Please don't take any absence of your favorite book, your favorite writer, your favorite creator as a slight to their quality, because it's certainly not intended that way.
Different things appeal to different people for different reasons.
They really do.
Yeah.
Really, really do. For instance, Craig loves going to rodeos.
He does.
He does. I think he secretly wants to be a rodeo clown.
His passion for that frankly gets a little tiresome for the rest of us.
Just
It's like, yeah, you've told that rodeo story before, Craig. We know this
horseshoes and
one.
hay. His whole life is horse. I mean, have you noticed he's growing out his goatee and his mustache now?
Of course,
it's crazy.
Yeah, he's cut all the ends off of his boots so his toes can breathe.
He has those boot flip flops now.
Yeah.
We're joshing. Craig has recently attended a rodeo and it sounds like he had a fun time actually, but it's not his world, and so we've been picking on him a little bit in our little group chats. So, all right, Matt, before we dive into this, I'm kind of curious. How did you make the determination of what made your list? Were there any criteria that you that were important to you?
Whenever I do these lists, I do them, I spend some time really reflecting on what I've read throughout the year, and I pretty much go by memory because in my mind, what's left the longest impression on me is what I am going to put at the top of the list.
Yeah.
So, I'll get online and I'll do some work to make sure I'm not just, forgetting something in passing. But yeah, by and large, I just think about what's made the biggest impression on me and what I've appreciated the most. A lot of that has to do with, if we're talking about a commercial property that somebody has taken on, and they've really delivered with that. In my mind, it's a lot harder to deliver something really compelling with a character that's been around for decades than it is for some that don't have that long history and you're starting with a clean slate. In some ways it's not, in some ways it is. I understand that. But I just have a real appreciation for somebody can take a character that's been around for decades and seems like everything's been done with them that anybody can think of and bring something to it that breathes new life into it.
Yeah. No, I agree with that wholeheartedly. So I need to eat more brain food because my memory is apparently and believably not as staunch as yours.
Well, yours is also packed with law, school, and fancy heavy book whatnot.
Yeah, but
I don't have that.
Yeah, but you have your own stressors, and you have your own your job is very important and requires a lot of memory recall and stuff. So it's not like you were without your own studies. But I think our brains work differently in that aspect. So I don't rely on memory per se. I am, as we have repeatedly, stated in the past, I'm a spreadsheet queen. I love Excel, and throughout the year, and I've already got my one for 2022 set up, and I'm working it. I've got my spreadsheets listed out, and I'm actually doing something new this year, kind of inspired by our friends over at EOC. I'm not just putting the title down, I'm putting all the issues that I've read. I've got a little column for that. I've read issues this for that, but just going across the board and putting everything down that I've read this year, whether it's new or old. But I also say, this is was published in this year, so I can scoot it out. But that's going to help me go back and look at what I've experienced this year. And so what I did to prepare for this episode is I pulled up my spreadsheet from last year. Got everything separated by title, got everything separated by publisher, got marked down who was my favorite, or, who writers were, what the artists were. And as I put those things throughout the year, if it's something that's really, really good, that's really, really striking my interest at the time, I just highlight it in green. If it's something that I just cannot stand, that I just didn't enjoy whatsoever, I'll do it in red. So it's kind of, red light, green light kind of thing. So in preparation for an episode like this, I can go back and I can start just pull out the things that I've highlighted green. This is what I've been absolutely loving. Put them in their own thing and then delineate it from there as kind of just a sieving out of the gold, so to speak. So that's what I do. Now, I look at things like what the plot is like. That considers heavy in my mind of a comic. But there are books on my list that the plots are really good, the character development's really great, but maybe the art's not. They're still on my lists though. There are books that are on my list that the art is phenomenal, but I couldn't tell you much about the story.
Yeah.
But it's just the art is so striking that book is on my list. And then you have the top of the top that is just, it's both.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of how I prepared for this. And those are the things that I look at and consider when making this. It's a mix between just the intricacies and the strikingness of the art and really the character development. And if you did something really cool throughout the year that played with the actual medium itself, you got my money. So you're on my list. So that's mine. Well, you wanna do this?
Absolutely.
Let's do it. So, forgive us for foregoing a short stack this week. We have read some comics, but nothing's going to compare to these. We're talking about the pinnacle. We're not worried about what we read this week. We're looking at the best of the best. So, Matt, with no further ado, why don't you start us off? And so, let's set some ground rules first, though.
Okay.
If you say something that's on my list, I'm not going to step in and say it's on my list.
Got it.
Like if your number 8 is my number 6, I'm just going to hold on that, and we'll revisit it at the time because I don't want to skimp short on any of our ideas. What makes it special to us? Like I want us to be able to explore that in this space. So let's do that. But kick us off, brother. What is your number 10 this year?
So, first of all, when it comes to these being my top 10, my top 3 are going to be running pretty tight neck and neck.
Yeah.
Once I get to my top 3, might even say top 5, which one is my number 1 or number 2 probably would change day to day. So I just want to put that out there. But from number 10, I had to pick From Rebellion Slain Dragon Tamer.
Okay.
By Pat Mills and Leonardo Manco.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, this is my number 10 because it's a one shot. Essentially, it's a collection. It's not essentially. It is a collection from their 2000 AD run that was put together and released as a trade paperback. And this is allegedly the last Slain story that Pat Mills is going to do.
Okay.
And I really, really like the Slain character. It's a barbarian character, but it's much more tribal. And the world that it's set in is ancient Ireland. And the world is built around the ancient Irish religious structure.
Yeah.
That's what it's built upon. And it's just really weird, great characters, very unique characters, like nothing I've ever read. So when I heard this was the last Slain story, I was really bummed. But it's a great one. Super, and it's consistent. Super weird. The art is outstanding.
Melt your eyeballs good.
Yeah, so, this is I really like barbarian stories, and this is unique among those. So this is one that I always recommend to people.
So as much of a fan of barbarian stories as I am, I was not familiar with Slain until you put me onto him a few years ago, like last year, maybe. I think it's the first time I remember you talking about a Slain book. And then you showed this to me, and it just knocked my socks off. So that tracks, man. It's so good. And I know you're such a big fan of Uncle Pat that
I first became aware of him when I believe the first thing I read of his was Martial Law.
Yeah.
Based on Garth Ennis's endorsement. I was like, Martial Law. And I love Martial Law. It's amazing. It is an outrage that's not turned into a movie or a show.
It has to be done the right way, though.
Yeah, well, and it's been optioned several times, and they've fallen through, but I digress. What's your number 10?
All right, my number 10 is going to be, let's see, I went with the other history of the DC universe. I don't know if you read this year, but this was written by John Ridley. He's the same guy who wrote 12 Years a Slave and Let It Fall. It is gorgeously drawn by Giuseppe Camuncoli and Andrea Cocci with Jose Villaruba on the colors. So essentially what this story takes the history of the DC universe as we don't know it, and it explores some of the larger characters and the development of the DC universe that were African American that we did not know of and didn't see. So it really focuses on Black Lightning and how he came to be, and it completely reshapes I don't think it reshapes is a fair word. It looks at these characters through a different perspective and a different lens. And it talks about how some of these characters feel slighted because, they're trying to do the same thing that the other powerhouse people do that get the most attention. They're doing it with less. They're doing it facing the entire struggles that you face based on race relations in the United States. And yet they're still constantly being overlooked and underappreciated by the mainstream. And it's this weird meta mix of dealing with the story inside the world itself and talking about the popularity of these characters and the almost maltreatment of these characters in the way that they were written by primarily white writers who just ignored what they could be. And, and that's not saying that they didn't try. I think these people tried to make, these former white writers and stuff tried to make the characters have gravitas and mean something. They just didn't have the baggage that goes with it to be able to tell some of these stories. I think we really saw that come to a head and saw what could have been with the Milestone stuff in the 90s when they started writing those stories.
Yeah.
And, man, the art in this is just, it's absolutely killer. Most of it's done in kind of this painterly style a little bit.
Yeah.
I'd say it. It switches up and goes through different perspectives. It's just beautiful, though. It was published in this big hardcover format. The books were the larger magazine size as well, so you just really get to appreciate. It is large for a reason, and you just get to appreciate the square footage that they drop on there. Like I said, it really focuses around Black Lightning, but you get so many other characters, and it's not just African Americans. Like Tatsu Yamashiro is in the book. Renee Montoya is in the book.
No.
And it really explores those people from a different angle. And when I read it, like, I just remember feeling like, okay, yeah, this is an important book.
Yeah.
The stories were great. The plot was fun. The way they laid stuff out was interesting. But it really struck to the heart of the characters, and it struck to the heart of the industry.
Yeah.
Especially in the 70s and 80s. So it really felt like an important story. So I really appreciated it. So that's my number 10, The Other History of the DC Universe. And I in the past have posted a few panels from that, and I posted a few panels from Slain on our Instagram pages. So if you're curious what we're talking about when we are talking about what the art looks like visually, because that's hard to kind of express in a verbal medium, go check out our Instagram page. You can see some of what we're talking about, and I think it would be well worth your while.
Yeah.
So, all right, we ripped the Band-Aid off.
Yep.
How you feel?
Good.
Good?
Yeah.
Ready to keep going?
Yep.
Drop your number 9 on me, Matt.
Number 9 for me is from Image Comics. This is El Mano del Destino by Jay Gonzo. This is a trade paperback one-shot of a luchador wrestler. Very fun. Great artwork. The artwork is very unique in its Jay Gonzo style. Is very unique, so I really appreciated that. Very dynamic. Great. He's great at illustrating action, all these wrestling scenes.
Mm-hmm.
So I really enjoyed this book. It looked interesting to me. I hesitated on picking it up. I'm like, I don't know. It looks kind of cool. So I was like, I'll take a shot at it. So it's one of those that I bought, with consideration, but really dug it. And I'm really looking forward to this guy doing some more.
I think he's got some stuff on Kickstarter right now.
He does. Yeah.
I'm not sure what the extent of that is, but I know he's got some projects happening.
Yeah.
So I have known of and conversed with him through the 11 O'Clock Comics community for a while now. So I've seen some of the early work and stuff. So I was really excited when I saw him get like the image thing. It's big doings for that guy. Big comeuppance. Can't wait to see what he does. I think he's got some bright ideas and some bright work ahead of him. I'm a little salty. Pre-COVID, I was supposed to go to a comic convention that he was going to be at. And
that's right.
We had commissioned him to do a piece for me, and he was going to do a team piece, and the price was ridiculous. Like it was cheap for the number of characters. He was going to do an authority piece for me in his style for like $300, like 6 characters, and then COVID happened. And now, like that price is like he's not going to do it at that price now, nor should he. He knows the value of his worth. So I'm never going to get that piece now, and I'm sad. All right, my number 9. My number 9 was a one-shot, and it was a book that we spoke about. I think it was one of our roundtable books. You can correct me if I'm wrong, but that is none other than from Image Comics, Cain and Abel. This was written and drawn in part by Shaky Cain, written and drawn in other part by Clint Abel. Shaky Cain, very familiar with, knew who he was, loved his style, has loved it for a long time, so he was what brought me to the book. But in a surprise twist, Clint Abel stuff is what kept me around. I fell in love with that dude's style. kind of an attitude that he bleeds into the page. So parts of these stories, the Shaky Kane stories, they look at, they look at a character that he's worked in. Shieldbug. I don't know if you guys remember that, but most of Shaky Kane's stuff deals with kind of that character, very superheroic, not quote unquote edgy, but just really good stories with his very very relatable to his name style.
Yeah.
And then you have Clint Abel, who just completely took me by surprise. Has this irreverence to him, has a knowledge of the superhero history, like the Golden Age stuff, to the point that one of the stories in here, it's called Creep Zone, and it's based on two characters named Nightmare and Sleepy, who I wasn't aware of until I read this book. And I was like, oh, well, these characters look like, Skull Digger and Skeleton Boy that Jeff Lemire's working on. That's weird. So let me look at the history of it. And it turns out they're all based on these characters from the Golden Age, Nightmare and Sleepy. I had no idea. And he just tied into that and ripped into it. Like I said, very irreverent, to the point that the teen superhero, carries lube with him and sneaks off to jerk off in places.
Nice.
And, it's just, it's not safe for kids. Obviously, these parts are, but he just doesn't care.
Yeah.
And he has this really raw sentimentality to him, where it is both nostalgic and appreciative of the nostalgia, and then just also pokes fun at nostalgia. There's there's this thing called Surf the Flesh Wave, where this giant black bear monster machine gun toting dude is fighting this fleshy behemoth, and just goes at her. It's just insane. The visuals were absolutely stunning. Yet again, served up in this larger format from Image Comics, this magazine-sized thing. It was wonderful to revisit Shaky Kane stuff. Kind of has that bright shine to it that something like Madman would have to it, but just done in Shaky Kane style. I love that dude. I would love to see them work together. Plus, you got to call it Cain and Abel. Like, how cool is that?
Yeah.
And it led me to watch some of Clint Abel's really, really, really weird film projects that he's done. So this book took me places, and it's a book that I've kept out. Like, it's still sitting out in my office months and months and months later. So for it to just be out and me to continue to come back to it and flip through it to appreciate, had to be on my list somewhere.
Yeah.
It just meant a lot. I have fond memories of looking at this book. So that's my number 9.
Nice.
What you got for me?
Number 8 is from Image Comics, The Good Asian by Pornsak Pichashot and Alexander Tefengi. Really like this book. I've actually stopped reading, I think, at issues 5 or 6, and now I'm just buying the single issues and letting them pile up so I can read them all together.
Really? Okay.
Yeah, it's just one of those stories that there's so much going on, and that I really want to read them all together.
Okay.
So, that's what I've done. I've just decided I'm just going to stop reading them until I have the complete set, and then I'm going to go back and start over and just read it all together. I just really appreciate it's a no-nonsense, street-level crime story. I really appreciate those. You don't get very many of those outside of Brubaker and Phillips doing, a crime stories occasionally. Not occasionally, but, yeah.
Every once in a while.
Yeah, occasionally, like monthly. Jesus. But outside of those guys, there's just not many of these that come out anymore. No. So this one I really appreciate. And it's in a unique setting. It's in a unique world from a different character. So I really appreciate the originality of that. So this is one that I make sure and recommend to people because it's different. It's different from most of the things that are on the shelf.
Yeah, no, it feels like it feels like a Darwin cookbook in the plot with a little bit of Walter Mosley sprinkled into it, and it's great. I'm probably that's a book I'm probably going to double dip on. Like if I do it a hardcover, I'll end up getting in a hardcover. I want it on my shelf. All right, my number 8, similar in tone, features characters of Asian heritage, different part of Asia, this one from the subcontinent of India, and this is my first book that dips into. No, it's not. That was a lie. It's my second book that dips into the big two. It comes from DC, and this is the new version of Swamp Thing. DC sunk its hooks into me at the first of the year when it did its Frontier books. And this is one of the only ones that I really enjoyed. I forget if they were called Infinite Frontier or what exactly they were, but essentially it was the 5G stuff that they had planned that they repurposed. And then they gave us Swamp Thing, and it was in the future, and it really played with these gods and set some stuff up. And then Ram V, who is one of my favorite writers and is having one of the he's having a comeuppance moment this year. Like he has increased his space, his shelf space infinitely, like at least by tenfold this year for somebody that I had only seen like once or twice in previous years.
Yeah.
He gets in there and just completely revitalizes the spirit, I think, and changes the direction of Swamp Thing. And I know it's in a way that you don't necessarily enjoy. But so what he did is he takes Swamp Thing and presents it as an avatar, which it always has been, but he runs it through an actual human versus somebody who is, the spirit of a human wrapped up in like, spongy.
It feels like essentially it feels like a werewolf story.
A little bit.
He can't control the transformations, doesn't know where he's going to end up when he wakes up. Yep. That's what,
and I think that's apt. And the trick is because, everything is tied to nature. It's kind of like mycelium. He can move through the green to go to different places. So it's this character of Levi Kame that becomes the new Swamp Thing, and he's Indian, and he comes from a remote area of India. His family are more inclined to tie into the old ways. They're not big on. I don't know what you would call it. They're dealing with a lot of deforestation. They're dealing with a lot of commercialization of the land, and they're pushing back against that. And this is this weird environmentalist story, similar to what Alan Moore set up in his original runs and stuff. But Levi's brother actually becomes one of the main focal points of the bad guy. So you have this brother versus brother, and then you see some old characters pop up like Woodrue. He shows back up, and it's crazy. And Mike Perkins on the visuals is just insane. Like there is so much detail into these pages, so much texture. A lot of that's delivered through Mike Spicer, who does gorgeous colors. As you might expect, there's a lot of green in this book, but Mike Spicer just goes to town on it. Like he gives you so much. I can't pass over Aditya Bidikar, who does the letters in this. So if you read anything by this, it promotes itself as a new era of Swamp Thing, and it really is. It really, really is. It has kind of redefined and reformulated what this character, what this totem can be, without getting rid of Alec Holland, without getting he's still there. He's still a thing. He's still who he is. But it shows you the diversity, pun and not really pun, but I mean that word on purpose of what Swamp Thing can be to different people at different times. As far as being a god, of the green. So this book has just blown me away. One of the few books from this past year that it was supposed to be a 10-issue run, it's gotten extended. And in an era where books constantly get canceled, this book picked up more issues. I don't know how long it's going to last. I hope they can just make it an ongoing. Would love that. But Ram V is just killing it, man.
Nice.
Just gold star on that dude. Just wonderful, wonderful work. So I think that brings us down to number 7, right?
Yeah. So number 7... for me is from Marvel. This is X-Force by Ben Piercy and Joshua Cassara.
Okay.
Yeah, this is one of I really, really like what this team has done with this book. Yeah. This has just been so good. The interactions between Wolverine and Kid Omega alone are worth the price. They're illustrated great. The dialogue is amazing. Benjamin Piercy has just nailed these characters so well. It just feels perfect when he writes these characters.
You've touted this relationship between Kid Omega and Wolverine for a long time, and I haven't read this yet. Like, it's one of those things I need to grab the trade for when it comes out.
It is so good, man. It's something that Craig and I would talk about all the time. Is these interactions between these two is just amazing. So Yeah, X-Force is one of the X titles. Whenever, because there's so many X titles going on, people have a hard time picking some of them, and that's one of them that I always recommend without hesitation.
Nice.
Yeah,
I need to read that. It's on my list of things. Just haven't gotten there yet.
If you read the first issue and you're not laughing and loving it, then don't bother.
Well, and I love Kid Omega, right? Like, Quentin Quire, I love that dude. I love him in most things that he's in. I very rarely read a Quentin Quire story that I don't like. So it's just one of those things. Like, I don't know why I didn't grab it, but I didn't.
Yeah.
I've got to tap into that, especially because I think it will shed some light on to. And I'm curious. Let me just ask you. This is your book. Does this book reflect / open up a better understanding to kind of the main X-Man universe and titles for what Hickman's doing?
What you're going to get insight on is I guess you would call them the dark motivations of Magneto and Xavier. The stuff that they don't want other people to know that they're doing. Their ulterior motives, their dark motivations, like, oh, this is going to have to be done, but we don't need everybody to know about this.
Yeah.
We need to appear more benign than we actually are. And that's really what you're getting out of X-Force.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
I'm sold. I'm going to go see if I can't find the trade, or if the shop doesn't have it, Comixology will.
Yeah.
I'll remedy this.
Yeah.
Because if it's in your top 10, then that says something.
Yeah.
So I think we're at number 7 now, right? Just double checking. My number 7 surprised me. And it surprised me with how actually the fact that it's not in my top 5. This was a surprise for me because it's a book that I love and that you really love and that Craig really loves and that most people really love.
Yeah.
And it's the last time that this book can be on a list like this.
Yeah.
My number 7's Immortal Hulk. This started out very, very, very high on my list. Like I had it at number 2. And if you remember back to the halftime show that we did in June, July, it was my number 2, 1 or 2, I forget which.
Yeah.
If we were talking about a run in its entirety, if we ever did a top 10 collections thing like that, solidly up at the top, 100. Like if we were talking about issues 1 through 50, 1000% top 2, as far as these things go. The tail end of this story did not necessarily grab me as much as I was hoping it was, and I think part of that is because it's a mix of my expectations of knowing and having listened to what Al Ewing said he had planned for this series and was actually planning on doing like 150 issues. I think he had to rush some stuff, and for me personally, it felt like there were some things in the last like 7 to 10 issues that felt like they were compressed. That kind of it affected my enjoyment of the book. Not to say that it's not really good quality. It's in my top 10 for a reason. It is insanely good. Like I said, Al Ewing wrote this. Joe Bennett did the pencils on it. Rui Jose did all the inks, and dude, the inks on this book.
Oh yeah,
this book is a prime example of what traditional inking can bring to a story. And so there were actually some other inkers in the middle of the title. I don't have them written down. I'll see if I can't throughout the show, like look them up and maybe talk about them at the end of the show. I bought artwork from one of them, which is stupid that I don't remember his name, so shame on me. But colors by Paul Mount and letters by Corey Pettit. This book wraps up an amazing, amazing adventure. If you were asking me about single issues too, the last issue, number 50 of this book, was partially probably in my top 3 favorite single issues of this year. The fact that it elevated it really made the quotes throughout the book make sense. Like it brought it up to this godlike level, and it just left the window open, and it shines on why Al Ewing is capable of doing these very high concept things while also diving into the minutia of the everyday grit and grime of a superhero story. He can blend both, and it really is outstanding. And look, just because I believe in honesty, the controversy around Joe Bennett probably flipped a switch in my brain on something. I can't help that. I have a really hard time. I really do try. I genuinely try. And on this book, I think I've done a decent job of separating the art from the artist. Mm-hmm. But I have a really hard time with that. So dealing with all the things that Joe Bennett did, said, drew, the mentality that he tends to have, probably shaded and jaded me a little bit to everything. Still gorgeous art. Can't take that away from him. But it dropped this on my list a little bit. Like I have to be like I can be honest enough by saying that. And is that fair? 100% no. Probably not. I mean, it's just not. But it's a true thing. And this list in particular is completely subjective. So that's part and parcel of it. It happens. You have to package that with it. And so for me, that's my number 7. It's Immortal Hulk. Number 6, give it to me.
From Marvel, Daredevil by Chip Zdarsky and Mark Gicchetto. There have been there's been other artists and other artistic teams that have come in and out of this book, but by and large, it was Marco Cicchetto. So this, like I've said before, I don't have any history of real interest with the Daredevil character. I got talked into to reading this when this series first started, and it's been excellent. So really got to give props to this creative team for making me so invested and interested in a character that I've always been just mediocre on in the past. So this is another one of those that people ask me what to read. It's always been at the top of my recommendations list, especially if we're talking Marvel. Daredevil's always at one of the very first that I'll mention.
Dude, Cicchetto's shadowing, like the way he like his perspectives, his angles. Like he takes something that Frank Miller did and just pulls it into the picture, especially when he deals with like windows. It's just crazy. You want me to flex your face muscles for you real quick?
Flex my face muscles, please.
I'm gonna make you smile. I'm up to issue 16.
Nice.
Yeah, I have gone back like I promised you and Craig I would do, and I've started reading it. And like I said, word. Actually, this surprises me that it's at this point on your list and not higher. I was expecting it to be higher.
This is the part of this is when I get on the list where things get difficult.
It gets really
and
hard.
Things could change per day.
Yep. Case in point, my number 6, wrapping out the bottom 5, I guess, of our lists, was my favorite book of last year. Was Philadelphia. This comes from Image Comics. It is written by Rodney Barnes. It is drawn and colored and inked and splashed and loved and everything by Jason Sean Alexander. This book is insane. I love vampire stories. I absolutely adore vampire stories. It's hard for me not to read one. I've read a lot of bad ones because of that.
There are a lot of bad ones.
This is shit. I read the first Twilight book, so I'm just saying I've waded through the shit. This book is not among those. This book is excellent. Case in point, it was my favorite book of last year. There has been this arc called "Home is Where the Hatred Is" that has been going on this past year. It's crazy. Yeah. This takes the historical perspectives of kind of what the other history of the DC universe does. This shows this generational trauma from an African American perspective. Rodney Barnes has written for American Gods. He's worked on shows like Runaways, but it puts a horror vibe to it, which is really what those things were. But it takes a supernatural bent to it. You're dealing with the former president. The second president of the United States, John Adams, his wife is a terrible person, but you also have a former slave who got his freedom and who was the victim of lynching and stuff, who is now a villain in this story, and it shows how much that trauma shifts certain people and shifts certain mindsets. You fall in love with the characters. There's this father-son dynamic of this guy who's trying to prove his worth and prove make good in the eyes of his dad, or at least he feels like he has to. And he's sometimes he makes mistakes, and his dad's also trying to forgive himself for some of the mistakes he thinks he made with his son. So there's a lot of this emotional stuff, plus just action-packed, meat grinder visuals of violent, hyper-violent vampire fights where people are just ripped from limb to limb, torn asunder, dropped in the only Jason Sean Alexander can do this. It's nasty. It's so fun to look at. He just does he has these splatter effects that you might see and you might expect to see from like a guy like Bill Sienkiewicz. but he does a digital rendering of stuff. It's just it's hard to explain. If you've never seen his stuff, go look at it. One of, if not the best Spawn artists, in my opinion, from his Spawn run. I've never read Spawn, so I'm judging by visuals alone. Him and Greg Capullo, they're probably tied in that for me. But like, you're getting Abigail Adams fighting Thomas Jefferson in this book, like what, as vampires and trying to take control of America, like and it plays in with contemporary themes, right? Like this whole, make America great again, take our country back. Like, oh, the golden earring, the things were better back then. So they're going back to the very impetus, the very beginning of the country and bringing it back to right now. And these vampires are trying to take over America. Yeah. It's this insurrection of originalism.
Yeah.
It's insane. Like, I love this book. I absolutely love it. That's why it's number 6 on my list, which brings us to our top 5. Are you ready? Do we need to stretch? You need to do some push-ups?
Yeah, this is where things got difficult.
Yeah.
But
it hurt to put some stuff where they were on this.
Yeah. This number 5 for me is From a Blaze, the Sumerian. This has had every, it's only 1, 2, maybe 3 issues a piece. They are, each one has different creative teams. But this is one of the books that I look forward to the most across the board. I love these runs. When this was first announced, I was very skeptical because it was announced as the uncensored Conan the Barbarian stories. Yeah. Not softening up the Robert E. Howard stories for a broader audience or a younger audience is the way they advertised it. The first series didn't impress me. I was like, this is no, you didn't deliver. I think if you go back and listen to the show, I actually use those terms. You didn't deliver on this uncensored. However, every series following the first one has been outstanding.
Yeah.
Outstanding. So I love this Sumerian run. It's, only going to go so far because they're straight quote unquote straight adaptations of Howard stories. Some of them have been expanded on, frankly, very well. Very well. So, yeah, this is over. The first series where I said it under-delivered, everything since it's over-delivered, and I've been thrilled with this whole Sumerian run from Ablaze.
It's got me double dipping. Like, I'm buying the hardcovers when they come out. So it's amazing.
Yeah.
It's outstanding. Absolutely loving it. I would be very curious, and I doubt he's read them. I mean, he may. I don't even know if he reads comics anymore. I'd be very curious to know what somebody like Roy Thomas thinks about these adaptations. Like, I would like to hear just a genuine critical assessment from Roy Thomas, somebody who looked at the original stuff and is part of the reason that this is in comics today.
Man, I'd argue he's the reason it's in comics today.
I think you have to. I'd be very curious to know what he thinks about them.
I mean, if you're a fan of the original Howard books, I don't see how you can dislike these. I don't see how you can.
Now, I'm curious, thinking about Ablaze as a publisher, has this caused you or brought you to any of their other books?
I can't think of another book that I've picked up. They're a publisher that I'm paying attention to.
Yeah.
They weren't on my radar before, but now, now I'm looking to see what they're coming up with, and they have my attention.
They've got me. I'm picking up a few of their other titles, and mostly because of the art. I'm such I like to see different things, and they are doing a really, really, really excellent job about finding these other European artists.
They are.
And bringing them to my radar. Now, these people may already be set up. They already, very established. I'm sure they are, because a lot of these have been published prior. These are just kind of reprints in America. But they are doing a phenomenal job of bringing these artists to my attention, and have got me reading more, bande dessinée, more French comics, and just I love seeing this resurgent of European artists that they are giving us, because I've never seen half of them.
Yeah,
and they're gorgeous. All right, I'm going to take things in a different direction. So most of what we have talked about so far have been superhero stories or barbarian stories. Stuff like that, vampires, violent stories in a sense. This book is not that, and it's the most recent book that's on my list. In fact, I read it last week, and I mentioned it on the show last week in my short stack, and that is Heartstopper Volume 4. And I'm including it on the list even though I read it in 2022. It was published in 2021. It just didn't get to me until 2022, so maybe that's cheating a little bit, but it's a 2021 book, right? The book is called Heartstopper by Alice Oseman. And particularly, it's volume 4 of this book. It's the 4th volume of a young adult series of graphic novels that Alice Oseman publishes, and it features a young couple that it's a young gay couple, and they're both in high school, and they are, in the beginning of the entire series, they go through the whole, I'm in the closet, but I like you. How do I express that? To this 4th book, they are established as a couple. They're enjoying dating. They are exploring the emotions that goes into that. But I like it especially because these young gay teenagers are not and have not had sex in this book. It is just completely giving this young queer couple the space to experience what it's like dating, and that is something that's denied to a lot of gay people, myself included. I did not get to, when I think about my experience and my own sexuality, growing up, queer was always reduced, gay was always reduced to a sexual act. And there were no emotions and there were no relationships, mainly because it was negative. This was a bad thing. For Nick and Charlie, the main characters of the story, it's not a bad thing. Their families are for the most part accepting. There's a few outliers there that give some contention to the plot, but they get to just date, and they broach the topic, sex is mentioned, but they both decide they're not ready for that. They still want to get to know each other better. They want to. She's fighting against stereotypes in this book. Alice Oseman is, as she writes it, and so it's just really wonderful dynamic of seeing these young people get the privilege of exploring relationships in the way that straight kids always have, and nobody really thinks about that. Like, you get to practice, you get to have this influence of life experience that queer kids don't get to have, and it's refreshing. It's delightful. It's a book that I wish I had when I was 16, 17, dealing with a whole lot of emotions, curious about things in the closet, which I would be until I was 20, 21. It's a really special book. It's all done in this, it's a single color, so it's very, I'm going to use the phrase rudimentary, but that's unfair because she's very talented. She's a very talented artist. But it doesn't have a lot of colors. It's not going into every spectrum of the rainbow. It's only one color. It's dual tone. Because she doesn't need all that. She lets the expression speaks for itself. It's very minimalist. And I absolutely adore it. Also in this 4th volume, she deals with eating disorders, as one of the characters develops dealing with the eating disorder, not only from the perspective of how a young person with an eating disorder might be able to face it, but really gives a genuinely good look and invokes some experience of what you might do as a person somebody you love has an eating disorder, and how to, as a young person, or even as me who's 34 years old, I don't know how to, I don't know how to fix that. I'm not a psychiatrist, but how you might talk to those people and getting them to understand that they need help, and taking the steps to get them to go get help without alienating them, because that's always a problem that you face, right? So just if you get the chance, I know like a lot of our group, comics readers, don't read graphic novels as far as like the young adult variety. I really don't read a lot of them. This is one that grabbed me mostly because of the subject matter, but it's one of the most refreshing books I've ever read. It's one of the most delightful, just inspired things that I've read, and it's minimalist. It really just gets down into the bare essentials of what you need to make a comic and what you need to understand a human. And like, this is a book that made me cry several times, and I'm not saying that as somebody's like, oh yeah, a single tear. Like, legit, I'll get teared up when I read this book, and I'll revisit it. So that is my number 5, Heartstopper by Alice Oseman, Volume 4.
Nice.
So it's a beautiful story.
Yeah.
Brings us to number 4.
So this is things we get when things get really tough.
They do indeed.
From Marvel, number 4 for me was Immortal Hulk.
Okay.
Of course, you've named the creative team. This is just a book I've looked forward to for the past few years. I mean, every time a new issue hit the shelf, I was excited. I couldn't wait to see what they had done in the latest issue. It's number 4 because it came to an end. Yeah. So now it's over. But this is just going to go down as one of the all-time great Hulk runs. No doubt about it. It's just an incredible work.
Brilliant.
And I really appreciate Marvel editorial letting this creative team do this. Because this is a horror story. This is not a superhero story. This is psychological horror and physical horror. The Hulk is not a heroic character in this.
Yeah.
He's a monster. And I really appreciate that. I really appreciate the Hulk being portrayed as a monster. And, you know, at its core, when he was created, it was a werewolf story. It was a werewolf story. So that's the Hulk that I appreciate the most, is the Jekyll and Hyde version of Hulk. And I mean, it was just done so well. I just can't oversell this thing enough. It was bittersweet when it ended, because I really, really wanted to see how this storyline was going to be wrapped up. So I wanted it to end, but I didn't want it to go away. It was a really weird feeling. So I'm glad that it ended, so that it didn't, run out of its own steam.
Yeah.
It went out on a high point, went out very strong. So if it were to ever be revisited, I'd be nothing but enthusiastic about it. But Immortal Hulk, man.
One of the things that got me the most about this book, and it's not something we really spoke about, but it's how Al Ewing and the rest of the creative team played with the aspect of faith in this book. Because, I mean, there is religion plays a big part in this book. Maybe not like as contemporary religion, but just the aspect of faith and the idea of a deity and what somebody like the Hulk would mean in the light of a higher power. It played with that really well. It found a really, really interesting balance with that, and how that would affect Bruce Banner and the people around Bruce Banner. Like I said, I don't want to spoil the ending for anybody who hasn't read it, but it culminates at that level. It culminates at the level of faith.
Yeah.
Just knocked myself, just jaw on the floor. I think of that one double page spread. You know exactly which one I'm talking about.
Yeah.
I was just like, oh my God. And then I don't read a lot of spin-off books. Like very rarely, a miniseries is spinning out of this main series that you love. You'll pick it up too. Not most of the time. Gamma Flight was fucking awesome. Like as far as miniseries go, that was one of my favorite this year. Like you give me Puck, the way Puck was delivered in this book.
Yeah.
It cracked me up. It was great. So, dude, I'm gonna miss. I miss new issues of this.
Oh yeah, man.
Yep.
Yeah, it was a highlight. Every time it hit the shelf, man, I was excited.
Maybe we can get Al Ewing on the show.
I can't see what would stop us.
He's got to be on his short list, right?
Yeah, must be.
All right, so my number 4, going back to DC. Dude, DC really, really got its hooks in me this year. I was a Marvel zombie growing up. Never been much of a DC
I was
guy.
a Marvel zombie, 100%.
Yeah. DC has been killing it
this
year for me. Like, I'm loving a lot of what they're doing. Number 4 for me is Supergirl, Woman of Tomorrow. This is written by Tom King, with art by Bilquis Everly and Matt Lopes. Never been much of a Supergirl fan. I've read Peter David's Supergirl, loved it. It was fun, but I'm not she's not on my short list of characters that I really enjoy.
Yeah.
What gets me about this book, and it's something that Tom King does really, really well, and it's something that not people who try this don't necessarily do well. He can take a movie, a story concept delivered in cinema, and he can make it work for like one of these like C-list, B-list characters. What makes Supergirl, Woman of Tomorrow so special is it's dealing with Supergirl and being written really well, but it's basically True Grit. That's essentially what it is. Like Supergirl is John Wayne, and she has got this little girl who has been wronged. Somebody has killed her father, and they are going after this person, and they are going to chase him to the ends of the earth because she needs to right this wrong. And at the beginning of the story, and this came out I think in June, she just wants a vacation. Supergirl just wants a vacation, so she leaves Earth. She flies off to this distant planet. She's like, I'm just going to chill out here for a little bit, not have a hard time. Nobody knows me here. And like you might imagine, she finds herself in a pickle, and she finds herself seeing an injustice done, and she has to step in and fix it because that's who she is.
Yeah.
That is at the heart who that character is. And she she takes this girl under her wing because this girl is hellbent. She is going after this person, and Kara probably rightly thinks that, okay, if I don't do this, then that girl's going to get killed, because the person that she's chasing down, new character, but it just ruthless. And he takes them all across the arguably the multiverse, as they are trying to chase him down. They end up on one planet at one point where it's circling a red sun, and so Kara's powers drop, and it's somewhere that Superman had been before. He had gotten dropped there before, I think by Mr. Mixelpix or something like that. And he had a hard time surviving for a few hours there. Kara has to survive there for an entire day. Really tests her limits, really tests her resolve. She explodes a dinosaur, which is fun. And if you haven't seen Bilquis Everly's art, like, oh my god, like, this is insane. The way that she draws these things. There's this one scene where they are riding what's essentially a Pegasus, and the way that she tells the story as they are riding this horse through space is just gorgeous. Like you could take the superhero aspect out of this, and this would be high art. Like, this could be a museum quality piece. It is stunning work. She has I don't know that I would call her work impressionistic, but it's borderline between impressionism and a little twinge of like Monet. There's some watercolor, some very loose stuff in there that she gives you, but it's at the same time it's very easy to see, and it's very emotive. She's next level, dude. I can't wait to see what she does in the future. So yeah, getting my Supergirl on for my number 4, because it's the hotness.
Nice.
So your turn.
Number 3. Things just get more difficult from here on out. From Marvel, X-Men by Jonathan Hickman and Lionel Yu. This has just been an incredible run.
Yeah.
Incredible. Going back to what I said at the beginning of the show, talk about breathing new life into a property. Oh my gosh. Man, did they as what Jonathan Hickman did as basically the architect of this has been incredible, as far as, and it's been so refreshing, and it just felt like everything was done like perfectly with the creative team. As the story, when the House of X, Power of X run was just so compelling.
Yeah.
That and Immortal Hulk, when those were hitting the shelves, man, I was like, this is just the pinnacle of comics right now. It was crazy good. And as we, those series ended, and then the X-Men main title kept going, and then there were the spinoffs like Marauders and X-Force, and so on. Those were all really good as well. Yeah. Those creative teams. They had amazing artists on these books. Just a crazy good artist.
Dude, Pepe Larraz.
Pepe Larraz is outstanding. His work on, of course, now he's on the other X-Men title with Jerry Duggan. It is just stupid good.
I literally shared a snap of one of his pieces from the most recent X-Men book on our Instagram page this morning, because just this camera angle, the camera angle alone was like, I've seen this before, but I've never seen this before. Right?
Not only is his just figure drawing good, is great, not good, but his fucking delivery, his dramatic delivery with I'm just going to call it camera angles, close-ups, seeing people. I mean, it's just stupid talent this guy has.
He is, and we've said it before, he is the epitome of a rising tide lifts all boats. Because the quality of art in all of these books, like, he has inspired, I think, other artists, or at least he's inspired the editors to put better artists on some of these. Man. Because the quality of a lot of these artists that have been working on the X books has gone up. Like, you can see an increase in quality from where they were before to where they are now. And I credit Pepe Larraz for inspiring that, because it's just, dude, he's a beast.
Its art is it's going to be one of those artists that I am going to be looking for now on.
Yeah.
What's Pepe Larraz doing?
Yep.
Because he's going to make whatever it is better. If it's good, it's going to be great. If it's great, it's going to be fucking outstanding. It's just, he's one of those. But, the thing that I just really, really wish I had more of in this X storyline is I wish I had Hickman and you doing more. Doing more storylines that had Wolverine, Colossus, and Storm in them. Mm-hmm. Those are 3 characters I missed so much in this X storyline because Colossus was pretty much relegated to a docile farm worker role. Yeah, and that I'm not criticizing. I'm not criticizing any of these choices. Yeah. I just wish I'd gotten to experience more of that. This Jonathan Hickman, Lionel Yu creative team on those characters because they did so well with everybody else. I really wanted to see, those characters done by that creative team. Yeah. But, and again, this one has recently come to an end. Hickman's run on it as well. I don't know about Francis Lionel Yu, what's going on with that creator, but it's just been outstanding, man. Another one of those, again, one of my very first recommendations if people ask me what to read.
It's hard to say that that it's not. It's been great. I've thoroughly enjoyed it. Inferno, I appreciated the way Inferno wrapped up.
Man, it was outstanding.
Yeah, because it both left the door open. And it did that thing where it puts things back in the sandbox, kind of, not everything. But it opened a lot more doors and windows for people like Jerry Duggan to explore.
There's a lot to play with.
And again, I said this on, and these are things that are important to me, but and I've said this on our show and over on CBB and stuff, the Comic Book Bears podcast, that I really appreciated the fact that of all of this great world building, that they literally are terraforming planets. They've cheated death. They've defeated everything. They can heal anybody they want to. The linchpin and the culmination of this is a gay relationship, a queer relationship between 2 women who have been denied the right to love one another.
Yeah.
And for me, I was like, okay, yeah, fuck, that just knocked it out of the park.
Yeah.
That was just dope. Also,
kind of keeps it true to the X-Men, true to its roots in several different ways.
It does.
In several different ways.
Yep.
So, yeah, that was a great angle on this story. Oh, it was such a good angle.
Everything about it was wonderful. And, it went back to where it kind of was. And, I'm still, Orcus, I still want to know what's going on there. Like I said, the most recent books are just fun, but this isn't the X-Men podcast. I'm going to...
Unfortunately.
Yeah. We could do that if we wanted
to. Yeah, I'm telling you.
We've got some pretty rough competition on that one, though.
Yeah, no joke.
All right, so my number 3. And actually, I just, in real time, reversed my 3 and 4.
Yeah. Yep.
I've done that. So my number 3 comes from Image Comics, again. It's so funny because I don't have any books from what was my favorite publisher of the year on here, which is weird. Like, how are you going to say it's your favorite publisher and none of their books are in your top 10? I don't know. It's just something weird. My number 3, in similar vein to your Ablaze comic. This comes from Image, but the books that we're getting from Ablaze were published overseas first and got over here to us this year. So was my number 3, and that is Carmen by Guillaume March. This was, again, published in Spanish or French, which I don't know first. I think probably in 2020, early 2021, but it did not get to us till 2021. This story was so gut-wrenching, so gripping in its quietude. Because it was not a loud story. There were not a lot of bangs and flashes. There were not it's the story of a girl who chooses to end her own life.
Yeah.
And it opens up with a gorgeously rendered naked woman. It does not shy away from nudity. It shows everything. Bleeding in a bathtub where she's opened up her veins. And she has this out-of-body experience all throughout this book where she is essentially greeted by what is an angel of death. Carmen. And Carmen's job is to pretty much get her to go with her. She needs to ascend to the next plane or whatever. She's made this choice. She's going to take her to heaven, to hell, whatever there is, the afterlife, for people who choose suicide. And it walks her through some very complex emotions. But Carmen is not like the other angels of death, because there are other angels of death. She looks at this as more of a holistic opportunity to make people's lives better, and so she's breaking the rules here, and she's showing this young woman all of the damage that she's done, and that takes her to a dark place. And there were moments in this book I was like, man, I really like this book, and I love the visuals, but I just disagree with this thought. Like I disagree, and that's what I love about this book the most. It made me think, even though I disagreed with certain perspectives that were being presented in the moment. It made me process those. It made me think intellectual thoughts about this and the way that I feel about these things, and the way that I feel about the way other people think about concepts like suicide. She takes her to see her parents, but it's not just this, like, look how much you're hurting these people. By the end of the book, it wraps around and is like, hey, look, you didn't mean any of this. You chose this path because you were hurting, and people have done these wrongs to you, and that matters. It doesn't have to be this way. And I showed you this so that you can maybe cut some of those elements out of your life, and now you know the things that you work on. And by the end of the book, she has a second chance. She's not dead.
Yeah.
You know, she gets to go back and make her life better, to do some things that she needs to do to make her life better. And she finds a forgiveness of herself in that moment. And she finds a forgiveness of the people who have harmed her. And it's not just finding forgiveness. She finds a way to make herself understand that none of these things are her fault. That she is not to blame, that these acts are very real in the moment, that this idea of, my existence is going to cause these people more pain than my not existence. She takes that and she unveils it to be one of the most, again, thought-provoking but really profound, emotive, hard to process, hard to digest, almost a treatise on somebody who has contemplated, committed, or attempted suicide, and what that weird whirlpool of emotions that people who are in that position, that mental state, are going through. I've never seen anybody explore it like this in a visual medium. There have been lots of comics that have tried. There have been lots of comics that are really successful at it, but Guillaume March did it in a way that was really compelling.
Yeah.
Intermixed with just his stunning visuals.
What you would call a clinic.
Yeah.
On comic book art. Amazing looking book.
Speak on it, brother.
You could buy it just to look at it. And it's amazing.
I know people who did. His line will not quit. It is fluid. It is sensual. And I'm literally I'm not talking about the bodies that he's drawing. I'm talking about his line. His outline of somebody's calf is sensual. There is something sexy about the way, and it doesn't matter if he's drawing a book like this, which features a lot of really curvy, voluptuous, gorgeous women, or some of the superheroes, some of the Batman stuff that we've seen him do. He has a sensualness to his line that is rare. He uses very thin lines when he needs to. He has lots of backgrounds. He puts a lot of ephemera into his art, and it's those little details, man. Just the ribbons on the main character's wrist as she's floating through the air and she's learning to fly, and the way that he just bends those angles and works the body types, but also works it into the construction of the page. Like if you can take a loose pen and you can just draw the flow of his pages and see how he's telling his stories. It's a master class of craft. Like, it's just, oh my God. Like, I could look at this book and do look at this book repeatedly.
This is one of those that stuck out to me because it's one of the best figure drawings I've ever seen. It's like he's like, what's the most difficult perspective to draw the human body? And I'm going to do that.
Yep.
Fuck you.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like that's him. That's like him showing off like crazy. Yep. Like his perspective on these curvy human bodies is fucking hard.
Oh my God.
And I was really struck by that.
Yeah, because he doesn't have an angle in the book.
That's a skill. That is a skill I don't think a lot of people appreciate.
Well, and it's crazy because what it reminded me of in hindsight, as we're sitting here thinking it here, I was reading a book not too long ago, and Gil Kane is talking about drawing hands, and that's something that weirdly he focuses on. He has a fixation on hands and does it really well. The way that Guillaume March draws feet. Yeah. Like just the angles and the curvature
feet
of this
are fucking
woman's
hard
feet,
to draw.
It's mind blowing. Like, and just that little thing. that masterful way that he delineates bodies, and not just bodies, architecture, nature, everything. It's the dude. What he delivered in Carmen is so unlike what I saw in Batman, and frankly, and to be credit, not to give credit, but to be fair, he's got a new book on the shelf right now that's another reprint of this, and it's not as good as what we got in Carmen either. So he went ham.
Yeah.
Hard as a motherfucker on Carmen.
Yeah.
And it shows. It is just gorgeous. It's stunning.
Yep.
So I think that makes number 2, right?
Yeah. Number 2 for me is from Vault Comics, Barbaric.
Yep.
By Michael Morrissey, Nathan C. Goodson, and Addison Duke. This was a huge surprise to me. All I knew about this book when it was coming out was the title, and that it was about a barbarian. And I'm like, I'll give this one a shot. And this is one of my favorite things I read all year, obviously. But it's an unbelievable surprise. I had no expectations going into this. There's just not many barbarian books that come out, so that's why I grabbed it. And I didn't know anything about the creative team, so I had no expectations to speak of. And this knocked my socks off. And then I was like super bummed. It was only a 3-issue run. I was like, this is robbery. This is bait and switch, how dare you? And then
what happened, man?
It immediately got signed because it exploded in popularity. I don't know how many of these I personally sold. I don't know how many people into buying this book. And, it's incredibly good. Incredibly good. The art is fantastic. The writing is amazing. The characters are super compelling. I love the main character.
Me too. The Axe is phenomenal. The main character, the Axe, is one of the best characters in anything.
So I cannot recommend this book enough. I can't wait for more of this. Apparently, he's planned a super long run on this based on the creator. Michael Morrissey was super surprised how successful it was. He had no expectation that it'd do anything special, and he was blown away by people's overwhelmingly positive response on this book.
Yeah.
So, man, give me more of this. I can't wait for more of this.
Nice.
Yeah.
Who'd you say the publisher was on that book?
Vault.
Favorite publisher of the year.
Yeah.
That was who I was talking about.
Yeah.
Vault was hands down my favorite publisher of this year.
Yeah.
I think we're going to talk about that more in a little bit, but just even though none of their books are in my top 10 across the board, they didn't put out a book I didn't love this year.
Nice.
Just amazing stuff. I didn't want to cut you off there, though. Did you have anything else you wanted to say about it?
No, I just, the only other thing I would say, you alluded to it, if somebody was asking me, if I'm trying to sell this book to somebody and they're not really into barbarian stories. So this story, this is about a barbarian in the traditional Conan sense. I mean, he's a thief. He's a hired hand. He's a mercenary. All he cares about is fighting, getting paid to fight, having sex, and getting drunk at the tavern.
Yeah.
And a hex is put on him. And the hex is you actually have to do good. So he's trying to figure out what that really means. What is to do good? Well, since these witches that put this hex on him know he doesn't have a good concept of this, they make his battle axe, sentient. Yeah. Sentient to him alone. To serve essentially as like a Jiminy Cricket type character. Like, okay, this is a situation where you have to intervene because this is a situation where you have to do good. Or, whoop, nope, you can't hurt that man because he's being a jerk. He's just being a jerk and you've got to let him be one. So it's like a Calvin and Hobbes type interaction almost because he's the only one that can hear the axe. So he's caught talking to his axe in the tavern, now we found out later that a witch that shows up, she can hear and see the sentient axe. Oh, and also the more people that Owen the Barbarian, which again, there's a story behind the name. Owen the Barbarian's amazing. The more people he kills with his axe, the axe actually gets drunk. Intoxicated on the blood of his enemies. It's just so outstanding.
Your conscience, your little Jiminy Cricket that's telling you can't do bad things is also addicted to the product of the bad things that you do.
I don't know how he did it, but this creative team plucked this from my dreams and put it on the page.
Well, and I love that you mentioned Calvin and Hobbes too, because the story there's a byline of like Hobbesian philosophy. Like Hobbes is who that's named after, this ancient philosopher of talking about the greater good and the quote unquote good life. Like there's this byline of Hobbesian philosophy in this barbarian blood story.
Yeah.
It's,
man.
It's nuts.
Yeah.
Just incredible.
Outstanding.
So my number 2 is an OGN from Fantagraphics. And it is a book that I went into not knowing anything. I picked it up because I just kind of saw it. I was looking for I was flipping through the previews and saw this book kind of shown off, and a name stuck out to me. And I was like, okay, this is blending nonfiction with it's a weird nonfiction story, and it's kind of philosophical in a sense. And so let me grab it. And the name that was mentioned was River Phoenix. And so I was like, okay, this is like, this person is talking about River Phoenix, and they have created this narrative that starts off with an exploration of River Phoenix. Let me figure out what this is. The book is called I Never Promised You a Rose Garden. It's written by Manny Murphy, who's a genderqueer Portland native. It is graphic nonfiction. There's nothing, there's nothing fantastical about this book, but it starts off with Manny's kind of early, not obsession, but just kind of appreciation of River Phoenix, and this looking into the life of River Phoenix and who River Phoenix was, and all of the weirdness that goes into the way that River Phoenix was raised, his relationship with his brother, the way that River Phoenix died, his drug abuse, his the way that the circles that he was a part of in Portland, dealing with Van Sant's films, and the sex worker culture, and this young gay men lifestyle, and it's kind of how he got connected with people like Keanu Reeves, because they were both in this circles. Keanu Reeves was part of this young queer Pacific Northwest culture of arguably abusive / older queer men who take advantage of young actors who need money in certain ways, and it puts them in a certain mindset. Obviously those two men went different paths and had different ways of delineating it and focusing on those things. But it breaks out of that to get into this history of the Pacific Northwest. So it takes this and it opens it up. It goes into people like Van Sant, and from Van Sant they talk about how these people were abusive and taking advantage of these young kids, and there was this aspect of the white supremacist punk rock culture that was being born and bred up in there, which goes into this history of almost apartheid of the Pacific Northwest, and this white nationalist structure of how that region was settled. And we always think about racism and groups like the KKK. We always kind of default to the South, but a whole lot of stuff went down in Portland.
Yep.
A whole, like, that history, and we think about now, like, the more contemporary history, the standoff from a few years ago, where the weird libertarian guys who were part of the government, stood around with guns and wouldn't let the government come get them, or they wouldn't pay taxes and everything. I mean, this made big news, and so it takes that and it goes all the way back to the history, brings it back, and in an incredible. There's a whole chapter on potatoes, Idaho. I mean, it just goes in weird, crazy places. But somehow it's incredibly cohesive. It's incredibly coherent. It all tracks. It all makes sense. It takes you on a... it is almost like a train of thought story. Like Manny Murphy just started writing about the things that went into their head and their understanding of history and their knowledge of regional culture. And this is what spilled out. And it takes you from pop culture to national politics to regional perspectives. It was phenomenal. And the great thing, it's a mix between prose and comics. Manny Murphy would take half the page and draw a very loose, almost charcoal kind of drawing. Sometimes very smearish, very vague pictures, and then sometimes a little bit more detailed. And the other half of the page would be something akin to prose. So it really messed with the format of what we expect comics to be. This was not just, word bubbles, and it was really a graphic story. So when I think about the phrase graphic novel, this embodies that. It's not an OGN. It's not a trade paperback. It is a novel. It's a novel just like you would read, but it's juxtaposed on every page with images that play into one another to help tell the story. So it is in a true form a graphic novel. It easily is one of it's going to stay on my shelf for a long time. And it's a book that, again, I'll revisit and have revisited since. And that's weird. I think this year, as much as we have to read and as precious as time is, I've probably revisited more of these favorite books than I have at any other time in history, in my reading history. I don't revisit books a lot.
Yeah.
But I've at least 4 out of 10, maybe 5 out of 10, I've read 2 or 3 times. And still have out and about for me to go grab them and look through them again. And that's not normal for me. And so I don't know if it's just because of a weird place that I'm in, or because these books attach themselves to me in some sense. But really, these books feel more special in some sense than other books have in the past. Particularly this one, because it gets into the music scene too. I mean, you're talking about, River Phoenix died outside of a concert that he was attending, possibly with some drugs that were given to him by the Red Hot Chili Peppers. There was a whole lot of big names that he was hanging out with that promptly fled and flew back to L.A. so they wouldn't be associated with his death.
Yeah.
That we now know about. And this is not new news, but it's just the history that was in this book was really cool from like a history nerd, from a pop culture nerd standpoint. I know Bill Zanowitz loved this book, adored it, and he's a encyclopedia of music history and knowledge. So if you have not read "I Never Promised You a Rose Garden" by Manny Murphy, it's number 2 on my list for a reason. I highly recommend it. It's going to be a different experience for you.
Yeah,
check it out.
Yeah. Well,
this is it, the Big
so
Kahuna.
The final one for me is from Fantagraphics, Red Room by Ed Piskor.
Okay.
Yeah. The reason being, this is like nothing else that I've seen on the shelf today. It's very subversive. It's unapologetically gruesome. And I just really appreciate the old school feel of this book. It feels like a 70s subculture book that would be sold in a head shop. The art is black and white, gray, zipatone, duotone. There's no color. Ed Piskor's artwork really shines in this book more so than... Well, let me rephrase that. I appreciate his artwork in this book more so than anything else I've seen him do.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's just that he's spending so much more time on it. I don't know if this is just a story that he just really wants to spend a lot of time on. I don't know what it is, but it just delivers differently to me. And it's got a different feel for it. It's subversive. I really like subversive books. I feel like there's not near as many of those as we should have. It feels like way too many things on the shelf are commercial stories with no substructure to them, no subtext.
Yeah, it feels like when a lot of people try to do subversive books, they only like walk up to the line. They don't jump across it. So it feels like
so many of them, if they're even trying, feels disingenuous. If they're even trying. So, and I just really, really like this book, man. And this is another one that I can't recommend enough. It's much like my musical tastes. It's not for everybody. It's hardcore, man. It's rough and it's extreme. So it's not for the faint of heart. And I appreciate it for that reason. I mean, I appreciate that it hits hard and some people are not ready for it. Some people it's too much for.
I'm one of those people.
And and that's what I like when these kinds of creations are out there in the world, that, offends people. I mean, it's offensive to me, but that's why it's compelling is the thing. That's why it's compelling, is because it's offensive.
Yeah.
And I hope it goes on and on and on. I can't wait to see where it goes with this. And again, the story, for those of you that are unfamiliar with, this is about the dark web and essentially not YouTube, but live video streams of gruesome acts of violence on the dark web, whether it be it is torture and murder. There's no porn. There's nothing. There's no sex crimes done. This is not that kind of thing. But it's violent torture and murder. And there's some really funny things in here too. So there's so much dark humor if you really pay attention to details, because you're looking at panels and it's like you're looking at a screen, and the chat windows come up.
Yeah.
And the usernames on the chat windows are hilarious.
Yeah,
they're comic creators, like K. Eastman is, one of them. And yeah, there's different comic creators' names in these chat windows. Like
they talk shit to one another.
They talk
it's
shit.
Totally an internet chat.
Talk shit to one another. It's outstanding, man. I can't recommend it enough.
I'm a little terrified to know what your definition of sex crime is if you say that there's no sex crimes in this book. Because I would argue that there's a lot of sex crime that happens in this book.
Well,
I only read the first issue, though.
There's no depiction of sexual assault.
Right.
Is what I mean. It's nothing like that. It's a rated R horror movie.
Mm-hmm. It's like Castle Freak.
It's like Texas Chainsaw Massacre, type feeling where, it's just gruesome violence, but not sexual violence. If it were sexual violence, it just would put a whole different bend to it.
Right.
And it's just not what this is. So, yeah, dark web, viewing. And frankly, this is based on urban legend that it actually occurs.
Yeah.
Things like this actually have occurred online, frankly. There's people that have posted videos of them killing people online and that have been viewed. There are some cases of that. So this is not something that's out of the realm of possibility, or frankly, that's even happened.
Yeah. So I only read the first issue, and I'm one of those people, like you said, this book was not, I'm not at a place where I could read this book. I was not ready for it. So I'm kind of like you. Like, there are things about it that I found offensive. I don't think offensive is why I couldn't finish it. It was abrasive. Like, the book was, it got to like it was like, okay, yeah, obviously, eugenics and murder offend me as just a person, but like, it's just the way it was delivered was so abrasive and raw. Yeah. I couldn't process it, and I would like to go back and try to reread it at some time. I just couldn't in the space that I was in the moment, because it is abrasive and raw, and it pulls no punches.
Yeah. Each issue is a standalone.
Yeah.
If you decide to try it out, each issue is a standalone that you can pick up at any time.
Really interesting thing that I think Ed Piskor explores in this book, tangentially, is the use of cryptocurrency.
Yeah.
And how that's going to look in the future, and the potential for bad things.
Well, I mean, again, based on reality.
Yeah.
Look, the Silk Road. The Silk Road is an example of what people can do with cryptocurrency on the dark web. There was a whole business of buying and selling drugs, weapons, and setting up murders using cryptocurrency. The history of the Silk Road. You can look that up. That's a fascinating true crime story.
I'll check that out.
Yeah, fascinating.
I love that you give me homework on every episode. And I don't think you mean to. You just kind of do. Like, there's always something connected to what we talk about that I'm like, oh, okay, I got to go check that out. So, got any last words on it, man?
No, that's it. Based on my list, is there any recommendations that jump out to you? Like, if you like that, you should really like this. That's something to think about if you don't have any come to mind. Because I have one for you, definitely.
Okay. Let me think on that a little bit.
Yeah.
You got me rocked right now. Let me think on that a little bit. Well, partially because most of, like, I'm going through my head, and some of the things that I would think, like, if you like Red Room, go read Brat Pack. But you've already read stuff like that, so it's like I'm trying to think of things that I know you would enjoy that you probably have not read, which is really hard because you're very well read, and because your reading habits are kind of niche. Like you really like certain things, and once you do, you're like a dog with a bone. Like, you go all the way down the rabbit hole. So I was trying to think of things that, it's like there's not a barbarian story that I've read that I think you haven't read.
Yeah.
If you like those, I would say you could read some Solomon Kane stuff, but I think you probably already read Solomon Kane stuff.
I have. Yeah.
Let me process that.
Yeah. Just curious. The one thing I would recommend to you is, as far as vampire stories go, have you heard of Requiem Vampire Night?
Yeah.
Have you read it?
No. I don't think so.
I think you would remember this
Okay.
one. Yeah. This is a French book written by Pat Mills. And
I have not. Okay, I have heard of this, but I have not read it.
The artist is Oliver Ledroy. This was hugely successful in Europe.
Okay.
Hard to find. I mean, you have to pay $100 to get the first collection, at least. However, I think you can read it for $2 on Comixology.
Oh shit. Okay.
Yeah, and it's got a very, of course, and you know, one of the things I appreciate about Pat Mills, everything he does is subversive.
Yeah.
Everything.
He doesn't know how not to do that.
Yeah. So, but the setting for this, so the summary on Comixology is your Heinrich Augsburg, a German officer dying on the Eastern Front in 1944, a good soldier, an honorable man. Your last thoughts are of your true love, Rebecca. You awake in hell. You're now a vampire knight, member of the ruling class on the twisted world of resurrection. A ruling class whose members did terrible, unspeakable things when they were alive, and who revel in the pursuit of power, pleasure, and corruption in death. Surely some mistake.
He didn't do that in conjunction with White Wolf, did he? Because it sounds like something that would be in White Wolf's arena.
Yeah, I'm actually going to read this on Comixology. I tried to find you can't even hardly find printed versions of it, even online anywhere for sale, especially the first volume. But when you do, it's $100 or more easily.
Well,
but I think I'm going to pick it up. I just bought some Pat Mills stuff that I should get here soon. After I get through that, I'm going to read this one because it's just you look at the reviews online are 4.5 out of 5 stars everywhere you see it.
Well, if we can find it on Comixology, do you want to do it as a round table?
We might, yeah.
Yeah,
We might definitely do that.
I'd be very cool with that. But let me tell you about my number one real quick. So my number 2 was a Fantagraphics book. Your number 1 was a Fanta book. My number 1 is a Fanta book, but a different Fanta book. It's neat that our kind of top are all Fantagraphics. Just a publisher that I love that does great things. My number 1 is surprising, probably unsurprising to you, and should be surprising to nobody, is Barry Windsor Smith's Monsters. This book is what has, probably one of many things, but I'm just going to say is what has kept Barry Windsor Smith out of the spotlight for like 2 decades.
Yeah,
he has been working on this book for at least 30, 35 years.
Amazing.
It is his magnum opus. I don't say that flippantly. This is the best thing I think that he's ever done. It looks the best. It is one of the most insanely incredible stories that he has ever written. It is a hefty book. It is a tome. You're getting your money's worth with this book. He plays with, again, this is something that I love. Linear stories are great and necessary, and most people should stick to doing linear stories. But when you're good enough that you can fracture a timeline and you can play with the medium of comics and you can play with the concept of story, where you can do what Barry Windsor Smith does in this book expertly, threading the needle, pure surgeon, like he did brain surgery on this book, then this is one of my favorite books of all time.
Yeah.
Like not just of the year, of all time. The story is about this young man named Bobby Bailey, and it starts off, and then Bobby Bailey in 1964 comes into a recruiter's office, and he's wearing sunglasses, and he's disheveled. And he's an army brat, like his dad was military, and he wants to serve his country because Vietnam's happening, and he needs to jump in through the fray and prove something to somebody. But the reason he's wearing sunglasses is because he's missing an eye, like he's got it jacked up, like he can't see, which is going to disqualify him from anything. But this recruiter has other plans. This recruiter is not just a recruiter for the main part of the Army. Bobby Bailey fits the mold for something special that he is supposed to try to find the right person for. It is this project that is a black ops project and is kind of what you can consider it's the US's version of a super soldier project. It is derived though from the Nazis. World War II, the Nazis started this project and got it up and going. lost the war, unfortunately for them, not in real life.
Thanks for qualifying that.
Yeah, just want to say I'm not rooting for the Nazis at any time. For these scientists, unfortunately, I say that because you get into their head a little bit. Like, much to their chagrin, they didn't get to finish their shit.
Yeah.
So they went into hiding, and they went to Argentina, they went to South America, but also some of what they did was infiltrate America. They took on different personas and different personalities and came here. Some of which under government supervision, they made deals.
That happened.
And they set up the project here. But they didn't give up their eugenicist Nazi mentality, and they're attempting to serve that. So that's the beginning, right? But there are connections from this recruiter and his family to Bobby Bailey's family, to Bobby Bailey's father, who was a bloodthirsty, damaged, war-torn, broken man who never came back home from World War II. Not any much different from his father, who was abusive to his wife and his kids, and is connected to some of these scientists. And Barry Windsor Smith finds a way to take all of these things. By happenstance, these two people in 1964 run in together, and he weaves a tapestry of history about how these people are connected all the way back to the early 1900s. And what this means for their future, and what this means for the country, what this means for the spirit of America, and what the government can and will do, and how the idea of patriotism is bastardized. And he does so by starting in 1964, and he tells you a little bit going forward, and then he jumps back into the 50s, and he tells you a little bit going forward to the 50s, and he jumps back to the 40s. He has this zigzag timeline that actually works itself backwards in history, but loops like an Ouroboros, like the dragon eating its own tail, circles back around to Bobby Bailey's future and the damage that's been done to him when he's turned into a monster. He's turned into like this giant hulking creature, which I think the impetus of this idea, I think we've talked about this before, was a Hulk story that they wouldn't let Barry Windsor Smith do, and so he took that and roped it up. I mean, but it's also a Nick Fury story. I mean, but it's not a superhero story at all. It is, again, subversive. This is an incredibly subversive book. It is all done in black and white. There are no colors in this book. It is Barry Windsor Smith at his peak, distilled to pure BWS.
Yeah.
The lines are immaculate. There is nothing out of place. It looks like he took 3 decades to make sure that this book was perfection, and he was successful.
Yeah.
The way that he lays out the page, the way that he lays out the story is breathtaking. The violence inherent in his pen strokes. Again, that is what I love about comics. That is what I love about comics art. This sequential medium is just like I was talking about with Gilliam March, in that his pen stroke is sensual. Barry Windsor Smith's pen strokes are violent. There is a chaos. There is an anger in a lot of these that he delivers, and it doesn't matter if he's drawing a giant, disfigured, misformed, hulking person that has been taken advantage of and is broken and is tortured, or if it's a tank, like if it's a tree, if it's dirt and rocks in a trench next to a Frenchman who's about to like breathe his last breath, or if it's a father who is making a sacrifice that he doesn't know, and he's talking to his family for the last time and doesn't realize that there is an inherent violence in every stroke that Barry Windsor Smith puts down on the page. And it's a book that will inevitably be, I think, and I'll be curious to see if I'm right on this, I think this book will be studied at the collegiate level because of not only what it does for narrative, it does something new. I say new, it does something I've never seen before. I think it's treading, if it's not treading new ground, it's treading ground that is less traveled by, certainly, to get Frostian and poetic. But the visuals they're somehow classic while being novel, and I don't know how to explain it better than that. These are classic images that are somehow put down in a novel way, and only Barry Windsor Smith, I think, can do this. I've never seen anybody else do this, and part of that may be jaded or colored by the fact that the book is not colored, to pun intended. So you're really only allowed to focus on his graphite, like you're only allowed to focus on him and what he delivers on the page. it's going to take you a little bit of time. This is a wordy book. Like he's getting down with it. Like Claremont would be proud. So because he writes it. He writes the story. It is novelistic in that sense. But he doesn't do it like he's not doing the old school thing where he's like, okay, obviously you can tell what's going on in this picture, but I'm also going to narrate what's going on in this picture. He splits it like what's happening over here tells you one thing that you need to know, and it's a key. It is interlocking to where the story is going. But what he writes is also of equal importance in equal parts, and he's not wasting your time in either direction. It's incredible, man. So it's stunning stuff. So get it on your shelf. This is a must buy. This book is a must buy.
Yeah, I want to check this one out. But Barry Windsor Smith is one of these examples that I've mentioned before of an artist who has grown throughout his career.
Yeah.
Crazy leaps and bounds. Go read his first Conan run, then read his Weapon X run. I mean, these are two different people.
I can because I have it.
Yeah, it's one of my favorite things of all time is his Weapon X run. Of course, he wrote that one as well. That is an amazing piece of work.
Yeah.
But yeah, so his growth as a creator is something to behold.
Well, and just because you're mentioning those things real quick, you see some of that. You see some of that in
sure.
this book. Like
I'm sure.
He pulls it into it. He's like, hey, remember this stuff I did? Well, look what I'm doing now.
Yeah.
He's grown as an artist, and he's an artist that didn't get stuck in a time and place. So, that's my number one. Best thing I've read all year. Best thing I've read probably in the last 5 years.
Nice. I want to check that out. The price point's the thing that slowed me down, but I am going to check it out.
It is, but for the number of pages you get, like if you divide the number of pages by the price point, you're paying less per page than you are on a standard comic.
Yeah. Nice.
It's worth it, man. I promise you it's worth it for that hardcover treatment. Oh, it's sexy. It's sexy.
Nice.
Really, I just look at it and drool a little bit, feel tingly in certain places.
Mm.
But that's our top 10. I think we put together some pretty damn good lists.
Yeah.
We covered a lot. Like there is widespread. There's something for everybody. If you like hyper-violent war stories, we got you covered.
Yeah.
You like young adult graphic novels about relationships, we got you covered. You want books that make you think. You want books that are subversive. You want books that are just cool, fun, dumb superhero comics. We got you covered.
I don't know. None of mine are dumb.
Well, no, dumb is not fair. I think all of the books that we talked about were intelligibly and intelligently written. But so yeah. Some of mine were just superhero stories, and there's nothing wrong with that. So good stuff. Thank you for putting together your list. If you are listening to this and you have your own top 10 list, I want you to drop it on our social media pages. I don't want to have to coax you. I don't want to pull you kicking and screaming. I want you to be excited about sharing it with us. Come to our Facebook group and join it if you're not part of that already. Tell me what your top 10 books were. I want to hear it. I mentioned it earlier, but you can find us on Twitter and Instagram or at SFG Podcast on both of those. And you can always fire off an email. We're southernfriedgeekery@gmail.com. Next year, around about this time, we're going to put together our top 10 lists of 2022. That's probably going to be equally hard. But the cool thing is, and this is something that I'm always interested in when I open up any given book, is this book going to be on my list for next year? Who knows? It could be. The thing that we pick up Wednesday might be the book that makes our top 10 pick. So with that being said, I'm curious, Matt, is there a book coming out this next week that you're excited about grabbing?
Absolutely. From Marvel, Sabretooth #1.
I knew you were going to pick this.
From Victor Laval and Leonard Kirk. I love the character of Sabretooth. I hate that he's been absent in this X world, justifiably so, but I still hate it. So I can't wait to see what's going to happen. I am unfamiliar with this writer, Leonard Kirk. I'm very familiar with.
Yeah.
So I don't know what to expect from the writing anyway, but I'm very excited about this.
Nice. Very cool. It's getting picked up by me as well.
Yeah.
Because why would it not be? I also hate that he's not been in the book, but I understand why he wasn't.
Yeah. It's a struggle.
It's kind of like when they took Hulk off. For a time off planet because they had to.
Yeah.
Because Civil War, he would have just won.
Yeah.
From a publisher that I continually just keep going back to and genuinely like most of the time. A return to a book, I should say, Man or Black. Read the first run of this.
Yeah.
It was really good. Dark Horse Comics is giving us Fire in the Blood #1. It's a Man or Black story. This, of course, is by Cullen Bunn, who did the writing on it. One of my favorite artists Tyler Crook helped out with this. Brian Hurt helped out with this. And then Francesco Francavilla dropped some love on the colors of this book. And I am about it. So, you know, Brian Hurt and Cullen Bunn did the Six Gun together. It's great. Cullen Bunn and Tyler Crook did Harrow County together. You know, that's great. All these people work well together. So this book is about powerful and ancient blood sorcerer named Roman Black. He's taken a young fire mage under his wing after she has done the impossible, taken her magic house's totem spirit inside herself. But the totem is powerful and may be impossible to control, especially when Roman's children begin to see the young mage as a threat. So I'm going to pick this book up. Love Colin. He's an incredibly prolific writer and doesn't steer me wrong most of the time. We put out a lot of words in this episode.
A lot, yeah.
Claremontian narration.
Claremontian.
By me. So, all right. Well, we feel good about it. We ready to close the book on it?
Yeah, I think so.
All right. We appreciate you all for hanging in here with us. Again, would love to know what your lists are. This has been super fun. It's one of my favorite episodes to do of the year. Matt, thank you for hanging out with us again, for doing this show with me and keeping the wheels turning on the SFG bus.
Love it.
Just love meeting up with you every morning. Yeah, I kind of consider this the end of our year, and we're turning a page on next week. So the year's been fun, man. Love doing with you. This is my favorite pastime, other than maybe reading comics.
Yeah.
So I appreciate it. And in the meantime, go make your own friends. Join a community. Be part of it. Read some books and go forth and love some comics.
And follow your favorite creators on Twitter.
And be nice to them.
That actually helps them get work, I have discovered.
It does.
Yeah. That can be a difference maker on them getting projects approved.
That's the one thing I love about social media is it can put you in an incredibly close juxtaposition to creators. And people abuse that all the time.
Everything's abused.
It is.
Everything.
So. All right.
Word.
Hug, air hug. Yeah.